Good day to you, and I'm so glad that you are watching this little video. Thanks for your support. This little piece of geometry is something that I threw together pretty quickly, and the reason why I did it is because I wanted to uh, play with the animation ability and make a little slithering being of some sort. It's kind of a cross between a snake and a lizard, I guess, and obviously it's something that I just made up out of my creative head. It's always been interesting to me that when people think of mechanical engineers, when certain people think of mechanical engineers, they don't think necessarily of creativity and the process of creating something from scratch. It's really, really important to me, and I think in order to be a good engineer, you pretty much have to be very creative. You're always solving problems that are intractable and difficult, and that's why they hopefully pay you the big bucks. um, so the creative ethic, I believe, is something that can be um, developed. I don't, a lot of people say, "Oh, you've got to be born creative," and people think of painters and sculptors and all of this, and they tend to think that that has to be an innate thing, and it may be. I don't know, but I think it's possible to expand your creativity and practice your creativity. I know that when I was a young kid, I had an amazing set of parents. My father, especially, was creative. My mom was a quilter and somebody who would sew incredibly wonderful jackets and pillows, and she was always sewing something. So she was very creative. However, my dad was the kind of sculptor, painter. He would work in paper mache. He ran an art shop. He was the principal of a school. And I think I learned a lot of creative kind of, I don't know, skills and the whole process, mostly from him. And a lot of the creative process just came from being left alone with stuff that I could work with, paints and popsicle sticks and so on and so forth. My dad used to take us, my brother and I, to the junkyard, and we would get junk and we would take it apart. And that was an incredible learning experience that went on for years. Of course, back in the day, you could actually go to a junkyard and walk around. Can't do anything like that today. Anyway, this model, I'm showing on the screen how to build it. I start with sketches and I do sweeps, etc., etc. And at some point, I go to the animation package and I start animating it. So you'll see that I've broken this model up into a bunch of different, a bunch of different. Let's just do this real quickly. A bunch of different. Here it is, animation designer. And I've broken this up into a bunch of different sections, and I've put revolutes in every little section there. And then when I hit play, it does this. So it's really kind of cool. And you have to kind of choreograph this thing, and there's some really nice little methods of doing that. You can put it on repeat so it keeps slithering. And in this little video, I use the timeline. The timeline makes it much easier to start playing around with the different movements. And so there you have it, a slithering little being with eyes and teeth, and he's got a nice little shape. So that's what this video is about. But creativity is important to practice. Now, a shameless little plug. I've written this book, Practical Inventor's Guide, and that has a lot of lessons, I believe, about how to be creative, how to practice your creativity. And this book is for people who want to go from some idea that they have all the way to product for sale on the market. Luckily, I've been instrumental to many folks in doing just that, and so the lessons that I've learned over the years I put in this book, and also the power of NX software is incredible. It really is. And it's certainly my favorite software. I am a Creo user and a SolidWorks user. I've used CATIA, Nastran, and many others. I've written books, at least 13 books, on the different software packages. I do Solid Edge, and NX is definitely my favorite one. So another shameless plug right here is the super duper advanced NX manual. You can get them from www.designviz.com. They're both available. They're not that expensive. A lot of people have purchased them, and for those of you who have supported me over the years and years, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and certainly I appreciate anyone who subscribes to this channel. Now, that said, let's talk about some of these modeling techniques that I used to make this little beastie, and I'll go through it as quickly as I can. So we start with datum planes and a sketch on the XY datum plane, and I'm creating a side view, and the side view is set to 40-inch length, and I start putting on the other entities that will create this nice little shape of the head, shape of the back, shape of the mid section. And my aim here is to create a top and bottom contour, knowing that the sweep that I use in the next little phase of this will be driven by a top curve, a bottom curve, and a curve in the center. One of the things I love about the sweep function in NX is that you can put a section in the middle of something and drive it with multiple curves, up to 3 curves. You could have, I think, 220 sections. So here I'm creating an ellipse, and I want the ellipse to intersect with the top and bottom curve, and so I'm putting intersection points with the sketch plane of the ellipse onto the top and bottom curves, and then I'm sweeping it. I sweep it with the bottom curve and the top curve, and it creates a swept freeform feature. Then I trim off the nose because I want the nose to be rounded, and I use a end-sided feature for that, and that's a very nice technique. I sew it all together to make a solid, and then I create this little sketch and this little extrude to cut the mouth out, and then I want lips, and I want the lips to start with sharp corners at where the lips intersect, and I want them to be fuller as they go along, so I'm doing a swept freeform feature also, and I'm using this little graph, if you will, this line and this arc to drive the diameter of the circle as it's swept along the edges of the mouth. And so you can see that the mouth starts with sharp corners, or the lips start with sharp corners, and they go out to their full diameter, and then they come back. And I make solids out of those and add it on. Then I want to do teeth, and the teeth are offset from the roof of the mouth. So I make an offset curve, and I make a datum axis, and I make a line segment that allows me to place a plane on the datum axis and the line, and then that allows me to create a sketch. The sketch is very simple. It's just a line segment with 2 arcs, and the arcs are they're perpendicular to that little line segment, and then I place that sketch onto the drive curve, if you will, that I made as a offset curve, and then I get to pattern it along. I believe I put about 30 teeth here, along 100% of the length of that offset curve, and there you go. I've got the little teeth. They were a little too small, so I went to the spreadsheet to edit the height of them, and with the spreadsheet edit, and if you use the pattern with the spreadsheet, you can edit the length of each individual tooth. And then to make the eyes, I put point entities on the face of the solid, and I experiment a little with the length of the solid, etc. But I put a point entity there, and I created a sphere on the point entity, and I united it together, and those are my little eye shapes. but then I want the eyes to have eyelids. So I'm making another sphere, but I'm going to cut that sphere in half with a datum plane that I'm creating on that location. In order to create the datum plane, I'm using a datum axis that goes through that point and perpendicular to the face of the solid, and I'm using a little sketch, and I'm making an L-shaped sketch, if you will, and putting a datum plane on it and using that datum plane to trim the little spheres that are just a little bit larger than the original sphere, so that makes a really nice eyelid. And then in order to make the actual eyeballs, or the pupils in the eyeballs, I put another point on that face of that sphere. I define a smaller sphere, and then I do two intersection curves, and those intersection curves are then used to subdivide the face of the sphere. And when I subdivide this the face, I can then colorize, if you will, the different facial regions. So there's a black and white, and then I fillet it nicely. So that's how I make the actual eyes. Then I want to break this model up into the sections that I'm going to use for the animation. And you could imagine that this is a toy. I've seen toys that are made like this where they have a bunch of sections and a bunch of hinges, and so you have a snake-like, something that's able to move in a snake-like fashion. So here I'm doing an extrude that is a symmetrical extrude with a symmetrical taper, and so each section has that nice little tapered shape. Then in order to connect the sections, I'm making little eyelets, if you will, and there's going to be one on the left and one on the right. Of course, the one on the left is going to be higher than the one on the right, but I'm going to be using the same sketch to do it. And in order to use a sketch with multiple contours, it is really great to master the technique of stop at intersection. So you can use these sketches with multiple contours in them very easily. So I do that twice, one upper and one lower. I give them little fillets, and then because this is NX, I can so easily pattern a pattern geometry, not just features. So I pattern those so that I have enough eyelets to be in between all the sections. There's an upper and lower eyelet, and so as you can see, I unite those all together. So each section of this little beast knows what to do. And then I fillet with the new technique of filleting. It highlights all the similar edges, and you just press the button and the whole thing fillets. You don't have to go and select every single one. That's a really nice new function that they have in the fillet tool. This is a 2206 I'm using, and of course I've already started to use 2212, and so far they've done a really nice job, and they've added some functionality, and it is superb. The next thing I'm doing is making all the rigid bodies in the animation package, and then when I have the rigid bodies, I'm making the revolutes that are in between every single joint. The revolutes are easy to select, or easy to create. You just select the two entities that you're going to make a revolute between, and then you find a common point and you find a common vector, and the revolutes are created. So as you can see, there's 6 revolutes. The model is very well organized, and once you have the revolutes, then you can put on position motors. You can put on speed motors too, but for this particular thing we need to choreograph it, and we need to pay attention to the timing, and so the revolutes have to spin sequentially, and so one follows the other. I'm giving a 1-second interval, and here I'm making or I should say I'm placing the position motor on each revolute and editing it so that it has a start and an end. Here I'm testing it. You can see it kind of folded in on itself, and that's because one of the revolutes still had its default 90 degrees on it, I guess. But I'm doing this on the basis of 20 degrees, and I'm experimenting, And when you start doing this, you'll notice that it gets a little bit tedious to be editing the position motors. And so a better way to do it is with the timeline, which I'm showing you here. And with the timeline, you can easily kind of move these events, if you will, back and forth, and you can edit each one and you can change the timing. So here I still have that 90-degree thing on one of the revolutes, and so I get rid of that, and now it's moving pretty cool in a pretty cool fashion. And so I just make a few more tweaks to the different position motors, and I'm almost ready to go with kind of the final motion of this thing. I'm experimenting with different entities. I think I'll probably continue to experiment as well. And then I'm going into the timeline and making sure everything is the way I want it. And then once I do all of this, I can then start putting the little polka dots and the fins on the model and so on and so forth. So that's the way. And then I start making colors on the lips and doing some other things modeling, but I'm done with the animation. So here's the finished product. This little beast has the polka dots and the little fins and the little feet, and his animation is set to repeat, so he's happily slithering and slithering. And again, my name is Steve Samuel from Design Visionaries. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe and like, if you will, because it helps us out. And enjoy this creative community. Enjoy NX, and see you next time.